Welcome to this talk on vPBL, developing a facilitated remote approach to problem-based learning. So vPBL is a modification of problem-based learning that was developed during the COVID-19 pandemic. And the core idea is to give students access to the same type of learning experiences and the same type of support that they would have been able to engage with before the pandemic when doing problem-based learning. We'll talk a little about the problem-based learning approach in a second, but for now, the core principle is that we are using digital environments to support collaborative student working in vPBL sessions. So problem-based learning at the University of Leicester has been used in the chemistry programme since 2007. PBL is based around open-ended problems with real-world scenarios that students work on in small groups of around 6. The problem-based learning strategy that we encourage students to adopt at Leicester is based on a cyclic process built around the principles of planning, research, and development and reflection. The diagram on the right summarises the cyclic process that we use at Leicester. The SET sheet is the name of the document that we ask students to note core features of their problem solution on. You can see we've built in opportunities for feedback all the way through this process. Some of this happens with the facilitator, who might be a member of staff or a trained postgraduate in a contact session, or some of it might be opportunities for the students to reflect on their own progress themselves. Now, during the COVID-19 pandemic, we wanted to retain these unique opportunities to applying the subject to open-ended problems. However, this posed a unique challenge because PBL wasn't something that could be easily translated into a digital environment in the same way perhaps lectures or tutorials could be. So in order to do this, we had to adapt the problem. First of all, we had to change the structure of the problem slightly, and we had to find suitable digital platforms in order to support student learning and collaboration during this period of remote study. So the problem was refocused to familiarise students with remote study tools, and we provided additional opportunities for the students to get support from their facilitators, and also opportunities for them to meet their peers in their team. So in terms of scaffolding these vPBL problems, we went from having a short, punchy activity that lasted just a few weeks, which was the pre-pandemic version of the activity, to something that lasted the entire term. And the idea was we wanted to give students more opportunity to think about the problem. We wanted to give them more flexibility at a time when things were very uncertain and they might have been ill themselves, or they might have been caring for family or friends who were ill. So we decided to extend the problem timescale, add an additional contact session to give them facilitated support and an opportunity to talk with their peers, and to give them a little bit more time to work on the problem while possibly access to technology might have been limited, for example, or they might have had lots of other things going on in their lives. So the process of converting a PBL problem to a vPBL problem is summarised in this slide. So I started by analysing the specific nature of the activity that I wanted to convert and thinking about what specific challenges it may pose. Then I thought about the relevant learning technologies that would allow me to replicate the same kinds of interactions that students had in the classroom on a remote platform. I had to test those technologies out and work with some of our learning technologists and able to do that. The learning materials themselves had to be adapted to work in the vPBL format, so we had to adopt our new timescale, for example, add our additional support sessions, and I had to rework some of the handouts to use that to reflect those changes, and also to use language that was appropriate for the COVID-19 pandemic. Instructors who were going to be involved in the PBL had to be trained in the pedagogy and the technology that we were going to use. And then obviously we had to do some training with the students at the start. The technologies that we chose were based primarily on technologies that we already had access to and technologies that we could provide training and technical support for. So we used Blackboard Collaborate Ultra to support the majority of the PBL contact sessions, the facilitation sessions. We encouraged students to use Microsoft Office 365 to generate their problem solutions. And we used Turnitin for the submission of student work. And I guess the unique thing that we did here, the thing that really differs from how Collaborate Ultra was used in some of the other types of learning activities, I made Collaborate Ultra rooms available 24/7 to students throughout the vPBL process, which meant that they could arrange ad hoc meetings outside of the scheduled contact times. So they could meet whenever was mutually convenient for them. And I know this was a particularly successful aspect of the intervention. So in terms of measuring the impact, we compared student use of technology with the Year 2 cohort, who at the time that I did this study, they hadn't started their first vPBL activity, so they were just doing lectures, tutorials and labs. We also looked at self-reported development of transferable skills and compared that to students who'd done PBL in previous years. And we also looked at student performance in the vPBL activity and compared it to the pre-pandemic equivalent. So Collaborate Ultra was the primary digital space that we used for the vPBL facilitation sessions. Teams were encouraged to make use of other online tools, so we signposted them to some, like Microsoft Office 365, but we were perfectly happy with students coming up with their own solutions and setting up their own social media or instant messaging groups to do that. The use of collaborative tools between contact sessions was measured and compared for vPBL and for lectures. And you can see the responses from the students doing vPBL in yellow on this chart. And you can see the responses from students who hadn't encountered that pedagogy in blue. So basically the yellows are the first years and the blues are the second years on this chart. The second years didn't have access to Blackboard Collaborate Ultra rooms in the same way the first years did. That's why the score is 0 for that platform. What we can see here is there's a very similar use of technology between contact sessions. So the use of technology to work with students to collaborate on studies between contact sessions. There's no real significant difference between the different methodologies. If we look at the use of technology in session, that's where we do start to see some significant differences. And there are some technologies that are more significantly used in the vPBL than they are in lectures, such as video chat, audio chat, and file sharing tools. Student performance in the vPBL activity was as good as it was in the pre-pandemic PBL version of the same activity. Like we can see in the chart in the top right, greater use of some digital learning tools, and there are some statistically significant differences in the three technologies I just mentioned. The student self-reported levels of transferable skills development were at least as good as they were for the previous PBL cohort. However, it's worth noting that there is no significant difference in the responses to these questions. So key recommendations. I would recommend that instructors carefully consider the nature of the problem and think carefully about the amount of support they provide students. So how long do they get to do it? How many contact sessions do they get? So if they're doing this online, do you need to extend the time scale? Do you need to provide more contact sessions? Students should receive clear communications in order to support time management. Collaboration might be facilitated by providing more time for them to collaborate remotely and by giving them access to more facilitated support. And in terms of choosing the digital platforms, always go for something that mimics the type of interactions students have in the classroom environment. So just to wrap up, new opportunities that I think this opens up. I think this might extend what we already know about online models of PBL delivery. It might provide us with an additional resilience in periods of emergency remote teaching in the future. And it might open up genuinely new opportunities for collaborative work, such as multi-institutional or even international collaborative PBL activities where we get students at different universities to work together. Thank you very much. And if you've got any questions, please do ask.